Tonight, we enter a room of baked clay, where a sound has remained trapped for 4,000 years. In the ruins of Nippur, once sacred to the Lord of Wind and Command, excavators working with the University of Pennsylvania recovered thousands of written tablets. Much later, scholars at the University of Oxford gathered translated Sumerian compositions into a careful literary record. Among those fragments are descriptions of divine voices, raging storms, terrifying roars, and weapons that overwhelm mountains and cities. They are real words from an ancient world. Yet the modern claim is stranger that these people remembered sound as a weapon, perhaps even a frequency capable of shattering stone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the night settles around you, share your location and your local time. It is pleasant to imagine quiet listeners gathered across the darkened world, all leaning toward the same ancient whisper. Your fingers rest upon a tablet no larger than a small book. Its surface is dry, warm, and faintly rough, like earth held after a long afternoon beneath the sun. Tiny wedge-shaped marks travel across it in disciplined rows. To the untrained eye, they seem almost decorative, little bird tracks pressed into mud, yet each impression once carried a sound, a name, a request, a warning, or a praise offered to powers believed to govern existence itself. The tablet is silent now. That silence is misleading, because the civilization that shaped it knew a world alive with noise. Reeds rattled beside canals, donkeys called from shaded yards, wooden wheels knocked against hard streets. Workers shouted over baskets of grain and damp bricks. At the temples, voices rose in formal recitation, while drums and pipes gave worship a pulse felt in the ribs. For Sumerian listeners, sound was never merely pleasant decoration. Sound announced authority. A king did not simply appear. Heralds cried his approach. A storm did not simply pass. It spoke through thunder above the fields. A temple hymn did not merely describe a god. It made that divine presence seem to enter the room. Records recovered from ancient southern Mesopotamia confirm that writing first served practical needs, counting goods, labor, animals, fields, and offerings. Yet by the 3rd millennium before our era, scribes also copied hymns, laments, myths, and songs of divine power. In those compositions, the language becomes grander, darker, and more unsettling. The gods do not stroll politely through human affairs. They shine, roar, command, shake, flood, and terrify. You sit beside a low oil lamp, watching its flame breathe against a clay wall. The scent is thick, a mingling of smoke, dust, wool, and warm mud brick. Somewhere beyond the doorway, sandals scrape over packed earth, then fade into the evening. A scribe bends close to his tablet, holding a reed stylus with careful fingers. He's not trying to preserve an engineering handbook. He's copying a vision of power. That distinction matters. A surviving hymn to the warrior god Ninurta describes him through storms, fire, terror, and immense force. Another composition presents him as a roaring hurricane, a being whose dreadful presence rolls across hostile lands. Such language feels almost physical. You can imagine the temple reciter lowering his voice, then raising it until listeners feel something passing through them. Perhaps this is where the mystery begins, not with a machine, but with a sensation. Ancient people experienced thunder without modern explanation. They saw lightning split trees and floods erase boundaries overnight. Their largest buildings were raised from clay and brick beneath immense skies. when the ground trembled, or storm winds beat against walls. The universe itself seemed to possess a voice. To describe divine destruction through roaring sound was not foolishness. It was one of the clearest languages fear could provide. Still, you cannot simply dismiss the feeling hidden in these lines. The tablets often treat voice as action. A command from heaven may establish order, remove protection, bring disaster, or make a city flourish. Words do things. Spoken power changes the condition of the world. This is not unusual in ancient religion, yet in Sumer it arrives with unusual weight. Pressed permanently into clay by people who believed correct utterance mattered greatly. A small curiosity lingers here. Some school tablets preserve lines copied by learners who were probably tired, distracted, or quietly miserable. They practiced lofty praise of gods while making ordinary errors, much like a modern child copying a solemn poem while wishing to be elsewhere. Even the most terrifying divine roar reached us partly through homework. There is gentle comedy in that. Eternity sometimes survives because a student needed practice, yet the room darkens again when you return to the words themselves. A roaring storm, a weapon borne by a god, mountains confronted by overwhelming force, cities trembling under command. These are images that invite later minds to build secret devices from poetic fragments. A reader searching for lost technology may hear machinery where a temple singer heard thunder. Another reader may see only metaphor and miss how deeply real sacred sound felt to its original audience. Among scholars, the discussion remains more delicate than either extreme allows. Many historians interpret these descriptions as religious poetry shaped by storm imagery, royal violence, and ceremonial performance. Others continue asking how chanting, drums, enclosed temple spaces, and emotional expectation created bodily experiences of divine force. The debate is not whether a proven stone-breaking weapon has been found. None has been confirmed in these records. The richer question concerns what ancient listeners believed sound could accomplish. You lean closer to the clay. There is no written frequency waiting there, no careful number marked beside a diagram of shattered limestone. No excavated bronze instrument sits in a museum cabinet, labeled as the device that dissolved fortress walls. What remains is more elusive. It is a pattern of language in which sound stands beside power, judgment, terror, and creation. It is a civilization repeatedly imagining the world as something that could be altered by a voice, and perhaps that is why the claim feels so tempting. A lost machine would be easy to understand. It would give the mystery edges, gears, measurements, something to reconstruct. But a human fear, preserved in sacred poetry, is less comfortable. It suggests that long before laboratories measured vibration, people already knew sound could enter the body, command attention, break courage, and make stone walls seem suddenly fragile. The lamp gives a soft crackle. A little smoke rises, curls, and disappears into darkness above you. In your hands, the ancient tablet remains still. It does not thunder. It does not split stone. It offers no final proof of a weapon hidden from history. Instead, it preserves the first uneasy trace of an idea that power might arrive not only with a blade, a flood, or a falling wall, but with a sound so immense that the world appears to tremble before it. And in the quiet, you begin to listen. Morning gathers slowly over the broad plain between the rivers, coloring the eastern sky with pale copper. You stand where water channels divide fields of barley, onions, and date palms, their green edges holding back a wilderness of powdery earth. The air carries the sweetness of damp reeds, mixed with animal dung, baked clay, and the faint bitterness of cooking smoke. Nothing here seems quiet for long. Water slips through irrigation gates. Birds quarrel among the palms. A farmer calls to an ox, and the call travels astonishingly far across the open land. In this low country, stone is rare and timber is precious. The landscape gives mud, reeds, silt, fish, grain, and sunlight without mercy. From these plain materials, people raise cities that appear almost impossible against the horizon. Their walls are formed from millions of mud bricks, dried beneath the same white sun pressing upon your shoulders. Their temples climb in platforms above clustered houses, as though humanity has decided to shape its own mountains. You approach Uruk by a rutted track crowded with carts. Dust gathers at your ankles. Porters bend beneath sacks of barley. A herdsman tries to guide irritated goats around a wagon wheel lodged in a groove, while a merchant complains with admirable enthusiasm. The sound is not random. It is the noise of concentration, exchange, hunger, ambition, and 1,000 little negotiations required to keep a city alive. Archaeological work associated with the University of Chicago helped reveal Uruk as one of the earliest great urban centers. Growing to extraordinary size during the 4th millennium before our era, its monumental precincts, administrative tablets, workshops, and mass-produced pottery suggest an organized society unlike the scattered farming villages that preceded it. You are not walking into a simple settlement. You are entering one of humanity's first experiments in urban life. It feels crowded, even without modern crowds. Behind the city boundary, narrow lanes turn sharply between mud brick homes. Sunlight falls in bright rectangles from rooftop openings. Within shaded rooms, women grind grain on rough stones, the scraping rhythm repeating through the hour. Children chase one another past baskets and jars, until an elder snaps a warning from a doorway. A potter's wheel turns with a soft, wet whisper. A brewer stirs a vessel whose smell is sour, warm, and comforting. Here, noise reveals status as clearly as clothing. From a modest courtyard comes the steady tap of ordinary work. From a larger household comes the murmur of servants, the stamping of animals, and perhaps the music of a private feast. Near the public buildings, commands sharpen, officials summon laborers, record keepers recite quantities, overseers count deliveries entering storehouses. A city does not merely exist in clay and reed. It must constantly speak to itself. Along one street, you notice bowls stacked in remarkable numbers, plain and rather unimpressive. They look like the sort of vessels nobody would display proudly at dinner. Archaeologists have found vast quantities of similar rough bowls at Uruk period sites. Some researchers suggest they held measured rations for workers, perhaps bread or grain portions distributed by institutions. Others caution that their purpose may have varied. There is something quietly amusing in the thought that one of the earliest urban riddles concerns a disposable lunch container. The sun rises higher, and the streets begin to smell of heated brick. You leave Uruk's restless avenues and drift toward the southern city of Ur, nearer marshes and waterways where boats glide through reeds taller than a standing man. Oars dip with soft, measured splashes. Fish flicker silver in baskets. Bitumen darkens the seams of small craft, leaving a sharp, oily scent in the warmth. Ur grows wealthy through movement. Boats bring grain, wool, reeds, timber from distant regions, and stones gathered far beyond this flat land. Copper arrives through routes stretching toward unfamiliar coasts and mountains. Shells, colored stones, and fine ornaments carry distant places into temple storerooms and elite graves. You hear the creak of rope and the hollow knocking of cargo against wooden hulls. Commerce has its own music, patient and repetitive, always promising more than it reveals. Above the busy approaches, sacred buildings dominate the imagination. Their raised platforms separate ordinary feet from divine space. You climb a stairway slowly, feeling heat rise from brick beneath thin sandals. Below, rooftops fold together in tan and brown layers. Beyond them, the river gleams among fields. In the distance, haze swallows the border between land and sky. From such a height, a drumbeat would carry. There is no need to imagine an impossible instrument. A large frame drum, struck at a ceremony, can pulse across a courtyard and return from enclosing walls. A horn can sharpen the air above voices. A chant can join individuals into one breathing body. In a city constructed from packed earth, where streets narrow suddenly and temple courts open like stages, sound changes with each surface it meets. A whisper disappears into reed mats. A shouted proclamation finds an audience. A procession can be heard before it is seen. Your path turns northward toward Nippur, not the richest city, nor always the most politically commanding, but one of the most sacred. Here stands the religious center associated with Enlil, whose authority was imagined as greater than the fortunes of particular rulers. Kings from competing cities sought recognition connected with this holy place. To govern land was impressive. To receive divine approval at Nippur was something far more useful, especially when explaining why everyone else should obey. Sand brushes softly along the base of a wall. A gatekeeper shifts his weight. In an open court, offerings are arranged with careful handsgrain, oil, wool, perhaps animals brought for ritual purposes. The atmosphere is less hurried than Uruk's lanes, yet more watchful. Each movement seems to belong to an order older than any one visitor. Priests, singers, servants, officials, and petitioners move through spaces where architecture directs the body and ritual directs the voice. A peculiar later legend would claim that certain ancient cities concealed chambers of secret knowledge beneath their holy precincts, as though the earth itself guarded forbidden inventions. No excavation has uncovered a hidden archive of sound machines below Nippur's temples. Still, the legend persists because temple foundations already feel like thresholds. Standing before heavy brick walls in the dimness, you almost understand why generations expected mysteries below them. The open scholarly question is gentler and more interesting. Specialists continue discussing how far these temple institutions shaped ordinary people's emotional world. Were the great ceremonies distant performances controlled by elites, or did their sounds, calendars, and rituals settle deeply into neighborhood life? The surviving evidence provides formal voices more often than private feelings. A laborer rarely leaves a written account of what a drumbeat did to his heart. Yet the cities themselves give clues. They are dense, vulnerable, and dependent upon uncertain water. A damaged canal may bring hunger. A hostile army may appear beyond fields. A fever may enter a home with no visible cause. The temple offers not only worship, but stability, explanation, and rhythm. Its festivals divide the year. Its storage rooms hold abundance. Its voices declare that the world, despite its dangers, still has an order. Evening descends over the plain in a slow wash of violet. Cooking fires brighten behind low walls. Boats settle against muddy banks. Somewhere, a reed flute sends a thin melody into the warm air, lonely but not sorrowful. Nearby, someone laughs, A dog responds with suspicious barking. Then the sounds loosen and scatter across the sleeping city. You remain among walls raised from River Earth, listening to a civilization that has made sound part of survival. In crowded streets, it measures work. On waterways, it guides trade. In sacred courts, it gathers fear and hope beneath the gaze of unseen powers. The cities do not require shattered stone to feel extraordinary. They have already accomplished something nearly as strange. They have lifted themselves from mud, filled themselves with human voices, and taught the silence of the plain to answer back. Clouds gather above the plain with the patience of something enormous and unseen. They begin as smudges on the horizon, gray against the fading yellow sky. Then wind arrives through the reeds, pressing them all in one direction. Date fronds turn their pale undersides upward. Animals shift uneasily beside their tethering posts. A woman reaches quickly for drying cloth, and a boy gathers scattered bowls before the dust reaches them. You feel the air change first. The warmth remains, yet it acquires a metallic edge, as though the heavens have drawn breath. Traders lower their awnings. Farmers watch the irrigation banks with narrowed eyes. The oldest among them do not require a prediction. They have seen what a sudden storm can do to grain, walls, roofs, canals, and carefully stored food. In this landscape, wind is never merely weather. It is judgment arriving without negotiation. A flash opens the distance. Thunder follows, long and rolling, spreading across flat earth without any mountain to contain it. It reaches your chest as much as your ears. Children stop playing. Dogs withdraw beneath wooden frames. A priest standing near a temple gate lifts his face calmly, because the sound above him resembles a language he has learned to recognize. Not ordinary language, of course. Something greater. The Oxford collection of Sumerian literary tablets preserves a temple hymn in which a powerful goddess speaks, and heaven trembles. When her mouth opens, the hymn says, "A storm thunders." The lines belong to sacred praise, copied by scribes who understood that the divine voice must seem larger than breath and throat. It must arrive like weather, surrounding the listener, impossible to ignore. The image is simple, but it reveals an entire habit of thought. A deity does not persuade softly across a table. A deity speaks, and the structure of the world appears to respond. The sky trembles because authority has entered it. The storm thunders because a heavenly decision has become audible. For worshippers standing beneath a darkened roof, such words could turn distant thunder into a presence almost near enough to touch. Rain begins striking the ground in separate heavy drops. Each one darkens the dust before vanishing into it. Then thousands arrive together, drumming upon roofs, baskets, courtyards, bare shoulders, clay jars, and stretched animal hides. The city changes its voice completely. Conversations retreat behind walls. Water rushes along gutters cut beside lanes. Doors close. Roofs leak in predictable places. Because even civilization's earliest cities apparently included the ancient pleasure of finding a dripping ceiling during a storm. A family gathers within a small room, illuminated by a wavering lamp. A grandmother murmurs a prayer while rain presses against the roof. Her words are soft, yet their purpose is serious. She is not explaining thunder through measurement. She is placing her household within a world of intention. The storm may be dangerous, but it is not meaningless. Above the city, powers are moving, deciding, speaking to you. Thunder is air expanding after lightning heats it violently. To them, that explanation does not exist as a comforting boundary. The sound may belong to the Lord of Wind, the commanding force whose decisions establish prosperity or disaster. A river may rise because a god has withheld favor. A harvest may fail because proper order has been disturbed. When life depends upon fragile canals beneath uncertain skies, divine displeasure does not seem an abstract concern. Enlil becomes especially important within this listening world. His sacred center stands at Nippur, and his authority reaches beyond a single city. In surviving compositions, he is praised as ruler, shepherd, and commanding power over the inhabited land. One hymn presents his greatness with images of wind, cloud, fear, and judgments hidden from ordinary understanding. His very reputation makes distant peoples quake. Such lines do not describe a workshop device. They describe the emotional shape of sovereignty. A king can order laborers to dig a canal. An official can announce a levy of barley. A household elder can settle an argument beside the oven. Yet Enlil's command is imagined as something vast enough to determine destiny itself. His voice belongs to the scale of floodwater, storm fronts, and the trembling horizon. It is government enlarged until it becomes weather. You stand beneath a portico while rain pounds the open court. Temple singers are sheltered nearby, their garments darkened along the hem. One begins a measured chant, not loudly at first, but with the steady assurance of repetition. Another voice joins him, then a third. Thunder rolls above their singing, and suddenly no clean border remains between human performance and the force it praises. This is where later imagination sometimes takes an unusual turn. A few modern enthusiasts have proposed that ancient descriptions of thundering divine voices preserve a memory of acoustic technology, perhaps directed vibrations used against buildings or stones. They point to language about trembling heavens and defeated landscapes, hearing in sacred poetry an echo of forgotten science. The proposal has gathered fascination, particularly wherever mystery is more welcome than patience. The tablets themselves remain less obedient to that theory. They speak in the language of hymns, ceremonies, kingship, reverence, and awe. They do not set out measurements, construction details, operating instructions, or named frequencies. They tell you what divine presence felt like in a storm-conscious society. They preserve a world in which sound signals command, danger, protection, and cosmic order. A voice becomes thunder because ordinary speech is too small for a god. Still, scholars do not treat these works as empty decoration. Researchers continue considering how performance shaped their meaning. Were hymns spoken before intimate groups, sung in processions, or delivered amid instruments and ritual movement? How much did thunder imagery borrow from actual ceremonies using powerful sound? How deeply did the acoustics of courtyards and enclosed shrines influence what worshippers believed they experienced? The texts are clear about sacred force, yet the living performance has vanished. Only the words endure. The storm reaches its height. Rain sheets across the courtyard until the opposite wall becomes blurred and pale. A lightning strike illuminates the steps, jars, offerings, and wet brick with unnatural clarity. Thunder breaks almost instantly above you. For one brief moment, your body understands why a voice from heaven requires no argument. You do not analyze it first. You receive it. A priest lifts both hands. The singers hold one long note, fragile beneath the enormous sky, yet strangely steady. Their sound does not compete with thunder. It gathers meaning around it. The terrifying noise becomes part of a pattern. The storm is no longer only disorder spilling from the clouds. It is a proclamation. It says that the world remains governed by powers greater than houses, fields, storehouses, kings, and the vulnerable bodies sheltering below. At last, the rain weakens. Water continues dripping from roof edges, tapping into shallow pools. Frogs begin their evening calls beyond the walls, as if nothing unusual has happened. The lamp is relit. Someone laughs quietly at a soaked sandal abandoned in the court. Daily life begins reclaiming the place from fear, yet the thunder leaves something behind. It leaves the memory of a voice without a visible speaker, a command felt through ribs and clay walls. To the scribes who shaped sacred language, that experience offered the perfect image of divine power, not a secret formula carved into stone, and not yet a weapon held in a warrior's hand, but a voice so immense that heaven itself seems unable to remain still. Beyond the irrigated fields, the land begins to rise in imagination, even when the horizon remains flat. Mountains occupy a powerful place in the minds of people living upon river mud. They are remote, difficult, wealthy with stone and metal, and inhabited by dangers carried through rumor. Traders return with tales of steep paths, strange forests, hostile rulers, and rock faces bright beneath colder skies. To a city of clay, the mountain world seems both necessary and threatening. A hard country holding treasures that the plain cannot produce. A temple singer draws breath in the dimness. Incense smoke gathers beneath wooden beams, carrying a dry sweetness through the listening court. His words turn toward Ninurta, the divine warrior, son of the great commanding power, defender of settled order. Ninurta is not presented as a gentle figure watching over a quiet garden. He advances like a flood released from restraint. His presence falls over enemy lands like violent weather. His strength is praised because he confronts everything chaotic, rebellious, or dangerously beyond control. Yet he does not travel alone. In the poem known in English as The Exploits of Ninurta, preserved through ancient scribal copying and studied within Oxford's collection of Sumerian literature, the warrior carries a remarkable mace called Shatter. This weapon is not simply heavy metal raised in a strong hand. It speaks. It observes. It carries messages. It advises its master concerning a dreadful opponent connected with the mountains. In a world already filled with divine objects and living powers, a weapon may possess a voice of its own. You can almost hear the listeners shifting. A speaking mace is a curious companion for any hero. Modern stories usually give their champions a wise advisor, perhaps an old mentor with patient eyes. Ninurta receives a weapon that can talk during a crisis. One suspects that even a god might occasionally wish his equipment would simply remain quiet and perform its obvious duty. Yet the strange detail serves a serious purpose. Shatter is not decoration. It is divine intelligence made portable, the authority of violence given speech. The singer's tone lowers as the enemy takes shape. From the mountain country rises a monstrous force, terrifying not because it resembles an ordinary army, but because it seems to infect the landscape around it. Stones gather in disorder. The highlands become defiant. The established balance between fertile lowlands and threatening heights begins to fracture. The enemy is less like a single creature standing in a road, and more like upheaval given a body. Ninurta marches toward that disorder. His weapons are described with images of storm, fire, brilliance, and unstoppable destruction. A mace bears the force of battle. A bow becomes attacking weather. Another weapon shines with the purpose of overwhelming mountains. These phrases belong to poetry, yet they are poetry formed by people familiar with weapons, raids, damaged fields, and political violence. Divine conflict reflects human anxiety, enlarged until it covers entire landscapes. You stand at the edge of an imagined mountain pass. Cold air moves across your face, carrying the scent of wet rock and crushed herbs beneath your sandals. The silence differs from the lowlands. There are no crowded courtyards or shallow canals nearby, only cliffs, gullies, and shadows gathering beneath ledges. When a stone loosens somewhere above, the clatter repeats across the slope, multiplying through echoes until a small fall sounds like approaching destruction. Then Shatter speaks. The weapon does not sing a delicate charm. It informs, urges, and directs. It recognizes the danger confronting Ninurta and helps shape the battle against it. That detail makes the story especially unsettling to modern ears. A weapon that delivers knowledge resembles more than an object of war. It resembles a system, something that identifies a target, communicates across distance, and assists the hand that releases force. This is precisely where speculation begins to creep quietly into the chamber. Some later readers have treated Shatter as a memory of technology, imagining an instrument able to project destructive vibration into cliffs, walls, or fortified structures. The roaring warrior, the speaking weapon, and the defeated stones seem to offer tempting pieces of a hidden design. Place those pieces beneath modern electric light, and a mythic mace may suddenly look like a machine wrapped in religious language. But the clay refuses to become a blueprint. No tablet gives Shatter a measurable tone. No scribe records a sequence of operations for splitting rock by sound. No workshop inventory lists parts for a weapon that directs vibration into stone. The mace speaks because divine stories grant voice to objects carrying sacred authority. Its power is not presented through careful engineering, but through the scale and brightness of myth. That does not make it empty. It makes it human. The mainstream understanding among historians is that Ninurta's mountain battle expresses the triumph of organized divine order over threatening forces beyond the cultivated world. The mountain can represent foreign danger, uncontrolled nature, and valuable resources brought under civilized authority. Stone is not merely stone within such a story. It is hardness, resistance, distance, and the stubborn refusal of the world to submit easily to the needs of cities. Within the poem, defeated stones are treated almost like characters facing judgment. Some are condemned because they supported rebellion. Others receive honorable purposes because they aided the victorious god. Stones may become materials for grinding, building, ornament, or ceremonial use. It is an unexpectedly practical ending for a grand supernatural conflict. The rocks are not only smashed dramatically and abandoned upon the hillside, they are sorted, evaluated, and assigned jobs, rather like unfortunate applicants at a very stern employment office. The detail opens a quieter path into the tale. The people hearing this poem lived among objects whose materials came from difficult journeys. Their homes stood on clay foundations, but their blades, ornaments, seals, and sacred furnishings depended upon imported minerals and stone. A story in which a warrior god conquers mountains and decides the fate of rocks gives religious meaning to trade, craft, and political control. It explains why hard things from distant lands now serve inside the orderly city. Scholars still examine how much the poem belongs to ritual performance, political symbolism, or learned scribal invention. Perhaps audiences heard it during ceremonies celebrating divine protection. Perhaps royal patrons favored its imagery because conquering distant regions sounded remarkably similar to commanding the universe. Perhaps scribes enjoyed the elaborate catalog of stones because educated specialists have always possessed a secret fondness for lists. The surviving composition allows several readings, though none requires an acoustic weapon hidden beneath its verses. The singer's voice becomes firmer. Ninurta advances, carrying terror into the heights. His mace is not silent iron. It is judgment with a mouth, movement with intention, violence accompanied by instruction. The mountains no longer appear permanent and untouchable. They stand exposed before a god whose task is to reduce chaos into useful order. A gust moves along the high pass. Pebbles slide from a ledge and scatter near your feet. Their sharp clicks disappear into the valley below. For an instant, the immense cliffs seem capable of listening, waiting for the command that will decide their place in the world. Nothing shatters through frequency. Nothing reveals a forgotten machine. Yet the old image remains powerful, a god walking toward resistant stone, while the weapon in his hand speaks calmly of how even mountains may be brought to heel. The rain has passed, and the city glistens beneath a sky washed clean. Along the lanes, puddles gather in shallow hollows, reflecting temple walls in wavering pieces. Wet brick releases an earthy scent, rich and cool for a few precious hours. At a doorway, a servant shakes water from a woven mat. A sleepy donkey refuses to cross the damp street, proving that stubbornness needed no invention. Near the sacred precinct, people move with quieter steps. A woman brings oil in a small jar. A merchant carries wool folded beneath his arm. A man whose face shows several sleepless nights waits beside an offering basket, rehearsing words he hopes will be heard. Here, nobody arrives without a purpose. Someone desires fertility, someone protection, someone justice, someone the quiet removal of a rival whose success has become deeply irritating. Within this world, power does not always strike like a weapon. Sometimes it declares. A hymn preserved in the translated Sumerian collection prepared at Oxford praises Inanna as a mistress whose command cannot easily be opposed. The great gods themselves are pictured as bending before her word, while her decisions carry an authority others cannot casually reverse. She is not merely beautiful, nor merely fierce. She is the force that turns desire into movement, favor into victory, and anger into ruin. Her city is Uruk, where the sacred enclosure rises from crowded streets and working courtyards. You enter beneath a tall doorway while morning light falls across plastered walls. Somewhere within, musicians tune strings. The soft testing notes drift like droplets, uncertain at first, then more confident. Attendants carry baskets of grain and fruit. Administrators speak over inventories, because even a heavenly household requires earthly accounting. Inanna's presence must be maintained through food, textiles, songs, ornaments, festivals, and careful attention. Divine majesty, it appears, demands excellent organization. A goddess may command heaven, but someone still has to count the jars of oil. You sense her authority less in a single terrifying noise than in the movement of everyone around you. A priestess steps forward, and others open a path. A reciter begins a formal praise, and conversation falls away. The temple space teaches each visitor how to behave before a power imagined as watching, choosing, favoring, and withdrawing favor whenever human confidence becomes excessive. In the sacred compositions, her word carries consequences. Cities may tremble beneath her fury. Rulers may lose what they thought securely theirs. Foreign lands may be brought low, not through a detailed campaign record, but through the pronouncement of a goddess whose favor determines success. Sound is becoming more than noise in the air. It is a verdict given shape by the voice. A ruler understands this better than most. He stands in a shaded chamber, wearing garments arranged to suggest dignity rather than discomfort in the warmth. Around him, officials wait with the careful expressions of men trained never to look bored near authority. He may command labor, troops, canals, and storehouses, yet his own standing still depends upon powers said to appoint kingship, protect cities, and remove prosperity as easily as a hand lifts a cup. Inanna's favor offers brilliance and danger. Her approval may surround a ruler with victory, abundance, and seductive confidence. Her anger may strip those gifts away. The goddess is linked with love and warfare, attractions and collisions, tenderness and conflict braided together in one unsettling figure. The same power that draws hearts together may also send armies toward a gate. That pairing can seem strange until you watch a human city closely. Longing, jealousy, prestige, marriage, wealth, rivalry, and violence rarely live in separate rooms. They cross the same courtyards. They appear at the same feasts. They trouble the same households after lamps are lowered. Inanna's breadth reflects a society honest enough to recognize that desire can build a life, or disturb one completely. Farther north, another kind of command settles over Nippur. At the temple of Enlil, authority becomes quieter, heavier, almost judicial. The great hymn honoring him in his sacred house states that his commands are loftiest. His utterances cannot be altered, and the fate he decides endures. His glance is imagined as sufficient to trouble mountains. Here is no impulsive rush of passion. Here is order resting upon a throne, speaking once, and expecting the world to arrange itself accordingly. You climb through a temple court where sunlight warms the top edges of brick walls. Below the brightness, the shadows remain cool. The sound of sandals changes as people pass from open ground into sheltered space. In one corner, a scribe sits with a tablet resting upon his knee. His stylus moves patiently, pressing decisions into damp clay. Deliveries, land, obligations, and offerings become orderly rows. The humble written relatives of divine command. There is comfort in an order that promises permanence. There is also fear. An ordinary human order can be questioned, evaded, bribed, delayed, or blamed upon poor record-keeping. A divine decree has no such convenient weakness. When a hymn tells you Enlil's word is unchangeable, it offers security to those blessed by the arrangement, to those facing loss, illness, failed crops, or political defeat. That same certainty must feel like a sealed door. A later modern curiosity attaches itself to these ancient ideas. Some enthusiasts have suggested that the sacred powers governed by the gods were physical devices, hidden objects containing knowledge like machines or stored instructions. Inanna's acquisition of powers associated with civilization is then recast as the seizure of advanced technology. It is an appealing tale for an age fond of secret archives and missing hardware. The clay texts, however, present social and sacred authority, not cabinets filled with mysterious equipment. Their mystery is more intimate. A word can truly alter a human world without breaking a single wall. A marriage declaration changes families. A court judgment removes property or restores it. A royal order summons men into dangerous service. A priestly pronouncement may convince an anxious household that a disaster has meaning. The ancient poets knew that spoken decisions could pass through lives with consequences harder than stone. Researchers at Oxford and other centers of Mesopotamian study continue discussing how these hymns functioned within actual communities. Were they performed before broad festival crowds, heard mainly by temple specialists, or learned in schools that trained scribes and administrators? Did their language reflect public belief, royal ambition, or the refined imagination of educated composers? The words survive clearly enough to be read. The exact faces listening to them remain shadowed. In an inner chamber, a singer raises her voice. It is not loud, yet it commands attention through steadiness and control. She praises Inanna's supremacy, her irresistible decision, her capacity to turn fortune. The listeners remain still. Each person hears the same lines through a different private hope. One seeks victory. One seeks a child. One seeks revenge. One merely hopes the household roof survives another season. Later, in another court, Enlil is praised with measured dignity. His command does not rush. It settles. The gathered officials bow their heads, and the low sound of recitation rolls beneath the high temple walls. There is no need for stones to explode. A city already bends beneath voices believed to decide its fate. Outside, evening light gathers upon the wet street. A child splashes through a puddle and receives an immediate command from his mother, proving that divine authority has modest household echoes. Lamps appear in doorways. Smoke rises in thin lines, carrying the scent of bread and oil into the darkening air. Above these human rooms stand the temples, guarded by silence, ritual, and remembered words. Inanna's voice promises change, dazzling and dangerous. Enlil's word promises order, immense and immovable. Between them, the people of the plain live beneath a universe in which sound does not need to fracture stone to reveal its power. It needs only to be believed. A stone bowl rests upon a reed mat in the cool interior of a sanctuary. It is small enough to lift with both hands, yet its weight surprises you. The surface is dark, smooth, and faintly luminous beneath the oil lamp. Outside, the city is shaped from brick, plaster, timber, and woven reeds. Inside, this single hard object seems to belong to another world, carried from distant uplands where the earth refuses the easy touch of a builder. A worshipper reaches toward it carefully. His fingers do not touch the rim. An attendant has already warned him, with the soft severity of a man protecting sacred property from curious hands. The bowl holds oil intended for ritual use, but its material carries a message of its own. Stone has traveled. Stone has endured. Stone has entered the house of a god, where permanence is desirable and every object must appear worthy of attention. Across southern Mesopotamia, good building stone is scarce. The cities rise mainly from sun-dried brick because the river plain provides clay abundantly. Excavations at Ur, conducted through the joint work associated with the Penn Museum and British archaeologists, revealed immense brick architecture supporting sacred buildings. The great terraces, walls, and platforms depended upon earth-shaped, dried, stacked, repaired, and replaced by human labor. A brick wall may tower magnificently. It can also soften beneath rain. Stone behaves differently. It resists fingers, weather, and ordinary decay. It enters the flatland cities through trade, tribute, warfare, or gifts, arriving from places that already seem stern and distant. A stone vessel in a temple is not simply useful. A carved stone figure standing in prayer is not simply decorative. Each one makes a quiet claim that something from beyond the plane has been gathered, mastered, and placed beneath divine protection. You step into an open courtyard where masons are preparing a foundation deposit. The morning smells of damp clay and fresh bitumen. A workman wipes sweat from his brow with an arm streaked brown from mud. Near him lie bricks stamped with a ruler's name, intended for a structure whose upper walls may one day crumble, while the inscription hopes stubbornly to outlast them. Builders are optimists by profession. At the foundation corner, a small stone object is lowered with deliberate care. Perhaps few ordinary citizens ever see it again. The wall will close above it, hiding it from daylight and casual admiration. Yet concealment does not lessen its meaning. Beneath the temple, buried objects speak silently towards the gods and toward future rulers. They declare who built, who dedicated, who hoped to be remembered when brick returned gradually to dust. The temple itself appears solid in the sunlight, but everyone understands its vulnerability. Walls crack, plaster falls, floodwater undermines lower courses. Enemy soldiers may tear through decorated chambers and remove valuable fittings. Sacred buildings require renewal because sacred protection never eliminates human maintenance. The house of a god may represent eternity, yet its roof still demands repair when the rains behave badly. Within the hymns and laments copied by Sumerian scribes, temples possess more than walls. They can shine, rejoice, become desolate, or mourn through the voices of their people. A city is not imagined as an arrangement of streets alone. It is a living sacred body, centered upon its divine residence. When disaster reaches the temple, destruction feels deeper than collapsed masonry. The order holding human life together has suffered a wound. The composition known as the Lament for Sumer and Urim, preserved in the Oxford Corpus of Sumerian Literature, presents ruined cities through sorrowful images of abandonment and attack. In its verses, the word of Enlil descends like an attacking storm. Settlements become haunted. Shrines fall silent. Valuable treasures depart in boats, and communities once filled with ritual life appear deserted beneath a terrible decision. Here, speech does not politely describe ruin. Speech permits it. You walk through the imagined remains of a damaged sacred district. The heat lies heavily upon broken brick. Ash gathers in corners where offerings once stood. A wooden door has vanished, leaving only sockets and blackened marks near the threshold. Wind travels freely through rooms once closed to ordinary visitors. It carries dust over a fallen jar, a cracked basin, and fragments of decorated plaster that no hand has yet gathered. In the stillness, even minor sounds become intrusive. A loose brick shifts beneath your foot. A pigeon bursts from an opening with an indignant flapping of wings. Farther away, a scavenger drags something metallic across stone, producing a thin scrape that makes the emptiness seem more complete. A ruined temple does not need impossible force to feel cursed. The lament presents calamity through the logic of divine decision because invasion, famine, and political collapse demand explanation. People who have poured offerings, sung praises, and repaired holy walls must confront an unbearable question when those walls fail. Why does a protected city become vulnerable? Why does a god permit enemies to enter? The poem answers through a chilling sacred arrangement. The destruction has been decreed. And even grieving deities cannot simply reverse the command. Among later enthusiasts, such language has occasionally been pulled into a different world. A divine word that destroys, a storm-like command, and shattered sacred buildings become hints of directed sound. Perhaps a weapon capable of breaking structures from a distance. It is easy to see the attraction. A wall brought down by unseen force leaves space for marvelous explanations, especially when the original text already describes authority as something heard and feared, yet ruins speak with a slower voice. Burn layers, displaced objects, abandoned rooms, repaired walls, and broken installations tell of warfare, looting, neglect, and political upheaval. Archaeology encounters the evidence left by bodies, fire, tools, weather, and time. It has not identified a Sumerian apparatus designed to sing stone into fragments. Even so, the poetry preserves a truth that measurement alone cannot recover. When a city believes a divine word has withdrawn its safety, walls may already seem broken inwardly. Confidence cracks first. Ritual certainty becomes uncertainty. Every ordinary sound within a sacred court feels changed, because the community no longer knows whether its god remains comfortably at home. There is a strangely tender detail in ancient construction practice. Kings sometimes buried inscribed objects inside foundations, knowing almost nobody in their own day would admire them. The message waited underground for an imagined future builder, perhaps one repairing the same sacred structure centuries later. It is a letter addressed to hands not yet born, placed beneath walls already expected to need renewal. Even grandeur carried an awareness of fragility. Scholars continue to debate the relationship between lament poetry and historical catastrophe. Some compositions may respond closely to actual conquest and urban suffering. Others may have been shaped for ritual use, giving repeated language to loss whenever communities needed to mourn damaged order. The difference matters historically, yet the emotional landscape remains clear. Temple destruction was remembered not merely as broken architecture, but as a silence where divine presence had once been heard. Dusk settles over the ruined precinct. The remaining walls turn purple, then almost black. Somewhere, a surviving stone threshold retains the last warmth of the day. You place your palm against it, feeling the smooth coolness rising beneath your skin. Clay walls have fallen nearby, but the stone continues waiting, wordless and difficult to move. In a land of brick, stone seems like defiance. In a sacred poem, even that defiance can be overcome by command. Mountains, shrines, and proud cities stand firm only until order shifts against them. Then the most enduring material becomes a witness, carrying no secret frequency, offering no easy answer, remaining beneath the night as though it has heard everything and chosen to say nothing. Night settles gently upon the sacred district, softening brick walls and narrowing the visible world. The moon has not yet cleared the rooftops, and the alleys are guided by lamps placed near doorways. Their flames make small pools of amber light upon the ground. A scent of sesame oil, wool, and smoldering incense drifts from the temple enclosure, mingling with the cool dampness rising from the canal. You hear the ceremony before you find its entrance. At first, there is only a low pulse, so distant that it resembles your own heartbeat. Then the rhythm returns, slightly firmer, spreading through walls and paving beneath your feet. A large drum is being struck within the precinct, not quickly, and not with the restless energy of celebration. Each blow is given space to expand. It rolls outward, fades, and leaves the night expectant. People approach without hurrying. A family walks together. The youngest child carried against a shoulder, already half asleep. Two elderly women speak quietly until they near the gate, where their conversation dissolves into respectful silence. A young man brings a small offering wrapped in cloth. He grips it carefully, as though whatever he asks tonight depends partly upon not dropping it in the dust. Inside the outer court, lamps tremble along shallow ledges. Their smoke curls upward and gathers beneath awnings stretched between brick walls. Attendants arrange bowls and jars upon low platforms. A priest checks the position of offerings with deliberate patience. Nothing is accidental, because ritual is a world constructed from details. A misplaced vessel does not destroy a city, but it may encourage worried expressions from those responsible. The drum sounds again. This time, you feel it through your ribs. The wall beside you seems to accept the vibration and return it softened, turning one strike into an atmosphere. People stop shifting their weight. Heads turn toward the interior doorway. The ordinary city, with its arguments, ledgers, children, animals, and cooking fires, becomes briefly distant. The temple is gathering everyone into a different kind of attention. Music belonged deeply to ceremonial life in ancient Mesopotamia. Among the objects excavated from the royal cemetery at Ur were lyres and harps, whose surviving decoration still suggests astonishing care. The Penn Museum preserves the famous bull-headed lyre, once fitted with wood and strings, now long vanished. The British Museum holds a splendid silver lyre from the same ancient setting. These instruments confirm that music could stand close to power, burial, sacred display, and the hopes surrounding the unseen world. A musician sits near the wall, his instrument braced carefully against his body. Its wooden portions would be fragile, its strings sensitive to touch and dryness. Yet the decorated head at its front turns music into more than an invisible pleasure. The animal form gives strength to the sound, as though each plucked string borrows breath from a creature larger than the player. His fingers begin slowly. The lyre does not roar like thunder. It enters the court with a rounded, trembling voice, gentle but impossible to ignore once noticed. Notes rise between drum beats, then rest within their spaces. Another musician lifts a pipe, sending a thin, clear tone above the deeper rhythm. The two sounds do not compete. They form layers, earth below and air above, while the listeners stand quietly between them. A group of singers emerges from the shaded interior. Their garments are clean, their movements restrained, their expressions shaped for solemn duty. One begins a line of praise, and the others answer in a measured response. The words carry through the court, repeating names, titles, and actions belonging to the divine presence honored within these walls. You do not need to understand every phrase to understand its purpose. Repetition slows thought. Rhythm steadies breath. Shared response turns scattered individuals into one listening body. A woman beside you closes her eyes. The young man, with the wrapped offering, holds it against his chest. The sleepy child has awakened and watches the singers with round, serious attention. The drum returns, louder now. It is not being used as an instrument of destruction. No wall cracks, no threshold trembles apart, and no hidden mechanism awakens beneath the floor. Yet the effect upon the gathered crowd is unmistakable. A heavy beat reaches below spoken reasoning. It enters posture, pulse, and expectation. It makes the interior doorway seem darker. It gives weight to names that might sound ordinary if muttered casually beside a market stall. Temple sound creates presence. A sacred statue, sheltered beyond public view or revealed only under controlled conditions, does not need to move visibly when the entire building appears to breathe around it. Lamps brighten polished metal and stone. Incense changes the smell of the air. Voices repeat the deity's greatness. Drums remove the casual freedom of silence. Together, these things persuade the senses that the human and divine worlds have drawn unusually close. One peculiar detail survives upon decorated objects from Ur. A lyre panel shows animals behaving like people, serving drink, attending a feast, and making music. Among these dignified creatures, an animal plays a lyre for other animal companions. It is a wonderfully strange vision, both solemn and faintly mischievous, as though the ancient artist suspected that music belonged everywhere, even where the natural order had loosened its belt and joined the banquet. The image has an almost dreamlike suitability tonight. In the lamp glow, carved creatures and living listeners seem to share the same court. You begin to sense why music is so often placed near thresholds, tombs, divine houses, and ceremonial drinking. It accompanies transitions. It helps people approach what cannot be touched directly, whether that means a god, a departed ruler, an uncertain future, or simply emotions too large for plain speech. At one edge of the courtyard, a specialist singer raises a lamenting phrase. The melody bends downward, carrying a sorrow deeper than the evening itself. Such performers could give formal voice to grief, supplication, and the restoration of troubled balance. Their art did not merely entertain listeners waiting for something important. Their performance was itself part of what mattered. A jar of beer is poured as an offering. Bread is placed beside it. Oil gleams in a dish under lamp flame. The musicians maintain their patient structure, marking the sacred action with sound. Your breathing gradually follows the pace of the drum, slow and even. The ceremony has altered time. Outside, a merchant may still be checking his goods, and someone is certainly complaining about a missing goat. Here, the night moves by measured strokes and answering voices. Researchers continue to question how these rituals sounded in practice. Instruments survive only in fragments, images, and written references. Ancient courtyards have changed, roofs are gone, and the precise voices of trained performers cannot be recovered. Some scholars emphasize music as elite ceremony, bound closely to temple and palace institutions. Others point toward images and smaller finds, suggesting music reached ordinary celebrations as well. The complete soundscape remains beyond capture. That uncertainty leaves space for modern fantasies. It has sometimes been suggested that powerful temple rhythms concealed technical knowledge of vibration, or that priests understood secret tones capable of weakening material objects. Yet a ceremony does not require fractured stone to wield force. Sound can organize bodies, deepen fear, encourage trust, and make unseen authority feel immediate. It can turn architecture into an instrument played by ritual hands. The final drumbeat arrives softly. No singer answers it. The lyre gives a last wavering note, then settles into stillness. For several breaths, nobody moves. The quiet is no longer the same quiet that entered with you. It has been shaped, hollowed, and made attentive. You step away from the court beneath a sky now bright with stars. Behind you, lamps continue glowing within the temple walls. The sacred musicians have not shattered a single stone, yet they have done something older, subtler, and perhaps more lasting. They have made a gathering of ordinary people feel the invisible weight of power passing through sound. A narrow room lies behind the public court, lit by a single lamp placed beside a bowl of water. The flame throws uneven shadows against shelves crowded with tablets, jars, folded cloth, dried plants, and small lumps of mineral pigment. The air smells of wax smoke, crushed leaves, and the sharp saltiness of human fear. A mother kneels upon a woven mat, holding the hand of a feverish child whose breathing has become shallow and quick. Across from them sits a trained practitioner. He is neither merely a physician nor simply a priest, because the ancient world does not insist upon that division. Illness may have a visible cause, such as a wound, spoiled food, or an insect sting. It may also be understood as an intrusion, a disorder entering flesh from a world of unseen danger. Treatment therefore needs more than one kind of skill. A poultice may cool the skin, oil may soothe irritation, water may clean a wound, yet words must also restore the boundary that sickness appears to have crossed. The practitioner selects a tablet and begins to speak. His voice is quiet, carefully measured, almost ordinary. That calmness gives it strength. He does not shout at the fever, as though volume alone could frighten it away. He names the danger. He places it within a familiar sacred pattern. He calls upon powers believed able to recognize disorder and compel it to leave. Each phrase leads toward the same desired conclusion: this body must no longer be occupied by suffering. Early Mesopotamian incantation tablets preserved in the Yale Babylonian collection include spoken treatments concerned with dangerous creatures, especially snakes and scorpions. Other ancient compositions address illness, troublesome forces, and conditions believed to threaten human well-being. These records show that carefully arranged speech belonged to practical attempts at protection and recovery. To the people using them, words were not a decorative addition to medicine. They were among the instruments by which danger might be persuaded, driven out, or contained. Outside the room, the city proceeds with its usual indifference. Grain is measured in a storeroom. A baker lifts flat bread from a heated surface. Somewhere, two neighbors are conducting an argument so energetic that even the household gods may be considering relocation. Yet inside this dim chamber, everything has narrowed to the child's breath and the low, repeated pattern of the practitioner's voice. He reaches for water. The bowl reflects the lamp in broken gold. He speaks over it, then touches the child's forehead with damp fingers. Water cleans, cools, and refreshes. But in ritual use, it can do more within the imagination. It can carry away what should not remain. It can mark the difference between a body troubled and a body restored. It can become the visible partner of invisible speech. The mother watches every movement. She has probably tried ordinary remedies already. A cloth soaked in cool water, a broth prepared with care, advice from relatives, most of it offered confidently, and all of it contradictory. Now she has come seeking order. She needs someone who can say that the danger has a name, that there are actions to perform, and that helpless waiting is not the only choice left to her. Sound offers that order. An incantation unfolds differently from a hymn sung in a great court. It may occur beside one suffering person, close enough for the words to settle into the smallest room. Its force is intimate. A threat is described, confronted, and dismissed. The spoken pattern creates a path through fear, moving from confusion toward control. Even when the illness remains uncertain, the ritual gives those watching a sequence of steps, and steps are precious when anxiety has erased the horizon. A servant enters carrying a small dish. Within it lies a simple paste prepared from ingredients known to the household oil, perhaps a plant material, perhaps something mineral, perhaps a substance chosen for symbolic as well as practical reasons. The practitioner applies it gently while continuing to recite. His hands and his voice are not competing explanations. They belong to the same effort, because care is most convincing when it touches the skin and steadies the mind together. In another quarter of the city, a different danger causes sudden panic. A laborer has disturbed a scorpion concealed beneath a basket. Its sting brings pain and immediate alarm. Someone runs for assistance while another person loudly provides unhelpful theories regarding the creature's ancestry and intentions. The injured man is seated in shade, sweat forming across his forehead, as a specialist recites words meant to weaken the sting's power. Some early spells against such creatures imagine the scorpion as an opponent whose tail can be lowered, restrained, or rendered harmless through divine action. There is something almost politely administrative about the wish. Rather than describing a grand battle, the ritual wants one very specific problem corrected. The creature should cease being dangerous. Its small raised weapon should behave itself. An ancient household threatened by a scorpion requires no cosmic spectacle. It requires the scorpion to lose the argument. Here lies a quirky thread within the record. Tiny pests receive remarkably serious literary attention. Snakes, scorpions, biting creatures, skin troubles, and mysterious pains appear beside gods and solemn formulas. Human beings may contemplate heaven, kingship, and the ordering of the universe, yet a creature hiding in a sandal can still command the full dignity of sacred speech. Grand civilization, it seems, never rises completely above checking where it places its feet. The practitioner repeats a phrase. Repetition is essential, not because every repeated sound possesses a secret material force, but because recurrence creates certainty. The same instruction returns. The same divine assistance is requested. The same illness is told, again and again, that it no longer belongs here. For the sufferer, the voice becomes a rope held in darkness, something regular to follow while pain disturbs ordinary thought. You move into a scribal room where such words are pressed into clay. The scribe leans over his work, copying a formula with intense concentration. A mistake in an account of barley may annoy an official. A mistake in protective speech must feel rather less charming. He checks signs, spacing, and lines with care, because language meant to restore order should itself be orderly. The tablet beneath his hand is not a machine. It does not emit sound until a living voice gives it breath. Its power exists in a chain of trust, the composition remembered, the scribe accurate, the practitioner trained, the ritual performed, the family persuaded that everything possible has been done. The clay preserves the arrangement. The voice awakens it within a particular night of pain. Modern readers sometimes see the command within these formulas and imagine a lost knowledge of tones able to disturb physical matter. If illness can be ordered away, perhaps stone could also be commanded to fracture. Yet the surviving incantations offer another understanding of power. Their target is not a quarry wall awaiting a hidden note. Their target is vulnerability itself, venom in the flesh, fever in a child, terror in a parent, disorder entering a home. Researchers continue discussing how these texts joined practical treatment with religious expectation. Some remedies may have provided genuine physical relief. Some spoken formulas may have calmed patients and families by creating confidence and structure. Some illnesses recovered naturally, while ritual received the gratitude. The evidence does not allow every healing moment to be reconstructed. Yet it shows clearly that words were considered active companions to care. The child's breathing eases as the lamp burns lower. Perhaps the cooling water helps. Perhaps the fever has reached its turning point. Perhaps the mother's hope simply notices every softer breath. The practitioner does not celebrate loudly. He continues speaking until the final formula has settled into the room, as gentle and deliberate as a hand laid upon a trembling shoulder. Outside, the night is vast and uncertain. Within the mud brick house, a small voice has been used against suffering. It has not shattered stone, nor claimed mastery over nature. It has done something more familiar and deeply human. It has given fear a shape, placed that shape at a distance, and invited a frightened household to believe that order may quietly return. The clay tablet gives way to a glass screen glowing in a darkened room. Outside, the river plain is no longer visible. No temple smoke drifts through the doorway. No reed stylus presses marks into wet earth. Instead, your fingertips rest beside a keyboard, while images of ancient signs appear enlarged beneath electric light, sharp enough to reveal every broken edge and accidental impression. A translation sits beside them. There is a divine weapon that speaks. There is a warrior god whose fury resembles a storm. There are mountains brought low, stones assigned their destinies, cities frightened by commands from powers above human rule. To a patient reader, these are fragments of sacred literature from a society deeply shaped by weather, warfare, kingship, craft, and ritual performance. To another reader, they seem like instructions hidden in metaphor. The transformation begins gently. A person notices that sound matters repeatedly within ancient poetry. Gods thunder, weapons roar, landscapes tremble, commands carry destruction. Then a modern thought enters quietly. What if these people were describing something physical, something they witnessed but lacked technical language to explain? What if a divine voice was not only a divine voice? What if the roar concealed a frequency? Once that possibility is admitted, the legend begins building itself. An ancient storm becomes directed energy. A speaking weapon becomes a device guided by intelligence. A trembling mountain becomes stone responding to resonance. Ritual language becomes technical concealment. The missing instructions become proof of suppression, because mysteries possess a curious talent for treating absent evidence as though it were merely hiding beneath the nearest floorboard. You scroll through images and dramatic claims. A tablet is said to describe a tone capable of opening gates. Another account insists that a lost civilization cut stone by vibration. A number appears beside the story, precise enough to feel scientific, though no translated Sumerian line provides it. Exact frequencies are quoted with the confidence of a market official announcing barley measures, while the clay itself remains inconveniently silent on the calculation. This is the moment when wonder acquires machinery. The ancient words are real. The modern framework surrounding them is much younger. Scholars at Oxford, who assembled and translated Sumerian literary compositions, identify the speaking mace, divine commands, storms, and mountain conflict within mythic poetry. Their work allows the language to be examined carefully. It does not uncover a technical manual for acoustic cutting, nor a record of builders using tones to fracture quarry walls. Yet the modern imagination rarely begins with fraud. More often, it begins with an understandable longing. You live in a world filled with machines that turn invisible forces into ordinary conveniences. Voices cross oceans. Sound is recorded, amplified, cleaned, reshaped, and directed. Doctors use forms of sound to examine bodies. Engineers study vibration because structures respond to repeated motion. Once such knowledge becomes familiar, an ancient poem about roaring power can feel unexpectedly close to technology. Your mind drifts into a lecture room smelling faintly of dust and warm electrical equipment. Upon a table stands a thin metal plate dusted with fine sand. A bow is drawn carefully along its edge. The plate begins to sing, not beautifully, but insistently, almost at once. The sand jumps, scatters, and settles into elegant lines and branching shapes. The pattern looks enchanted. Experiments of this kind are associated with the work of Ernst Chladni, whose studies made vibration visible upon plates long after Sumerian temples had vanished beneath mounds. Modern university demonstrations, including teaching materials used at American institutions such as the University of California, Los Angeles, show how particular modes of vibration arrange grains along still regions of a moving surface. The result is genuine physics, delicate and beautiful, with no need for a concealed ancient inheritance. But beautiful demonstrations are easily carried into larger stories. A little sand moves into a geometric pattern, and the mind imagines blocks of stone moving obediently through the air. A glass breaks when driven powerfully at a matching resonance, and the mind leaps toward fortress walls dissolving beneath a priestly chant. The distance between the small experiment and the monumental claim disappears beneath the warmth of possibility. It is a seductive shortcut. There is also an oddly charming branch of this belief. Modern admirers of sacred sound sometimes sprinkle powders upon vibrating surfaces, photograph the resulting patterns, and treat them as visible signatures of lost wisdom. A circle or star shape becomes evidence that ancient chants shaped matter deliberately. The patterns are often lovely. Unfortunately for the grander claim, the form depends heavily upon the plate, its support, its material, and the mode at which it vibrates. The sand is obedient to physics, not to an uncovered Sumerian password. Still, you understand the emotional pull. To read an ancient tablet is to encounter distance. Names arrive without faces. Temples stand without roofs. Songs remain without melody. The lost world offers words, yet denies you most of its living presence. A secret frequency seems to repair that absence. Suddenly, the tablet is not merely literature. It becomes a coded object. Suddenly, you are not simply reading about distant worshippers. You're standing near a forbidden door, perhaps only one tone away from opening it. A soft hum comes from the machine beside you. It is almost beneath hearing, the ordinary breathing of modern equipment. Against such a sound, the tablet image becomes stranger. You enlarge a damaged line. Several signs remain uncertain. A bracket indicates a missing passage. The very gaps encourage invention, because a broken text resembles a closed room whose furniture can be imagined in any arrangement. This is where careful scholars become cautious. Specialists in ancient Mesopotamian literature continue discussing how divine violence should be understood within ritual, political, and poetic settings. They ask what performance did to an audience, how kingship shaped images of command, and how mountain resources influenced tales of conquest. They do not deny that sound mattered profoundly. They question whether religious imagery can be transformed responsibly into evidence for a machine without supporting remains, measurements, or instructions. That caution can feel disappointing. A secret instrument would shimmer beautifully in the mind. You might picture priests standing before immense blocks of stone, holding resonant vessels whose tones pass invisibly into the rock. You might hear one pure note rise into dawn air, while a seam appears across granite as gently as a crack in winter ice. No sweating quarry crew, no dragging ropes, no chipped tools, no supervisor complaining that the workforce has vanished at the precise moment serious lifting begins. It would be marvelous. Yet marvel is not the same as memory. Ancient texts are not diminished when they are permitted to remain religious poems rather than disguised patents. Their voices preserve something more subtle than a lost apparatus. They reveal how people imagined authority traveling through sound, how destruction might be felt as a command, and how a universe ruled by invisible powers could seem to answer through storms, songs, and terrible spoken judgment. The screen dims slightly as the room grows still. The tablet remains suspended before you, neither confirming the legend nor quite releasing its hold upon the imagination. Somewhere between translated clay and vibrating sand, a modern story has taken shape, the belief that one precise tone could command stone to surrender. It is not written clearly upon the tablet, but once heard, the idea is difficult to silence. A limestone block stands alone upon a workbench, pale beneath a clean white lamp. It is not part of a temple wall, nor carried upon a sled through sand. It is only a block, squared by modern tools, marked with faint seams and natural imperfections. Beside it lies a small metal hammer, an electronic sensor, and a cable disappearing into quiet machinery. A technician taps the stone. The sound is modest, almost disappointing. A dry note leaves the surface, travels through the block, and fades. The machine records what your ears cannot separate clearly, several vibrations moving through the material at different rates. Some weaken quickly, others linger. Every solid object responds in its own manner, shaped by size, density, internal cracks, mineral grains, and the way it is held. Stone can sing. That fact is perfectly real, though it requires no vanished priesthood or forbidden chamber. Researchers at the United States National Institute of Standards and Technology use resonant ultrasound methods to study material properties through natural vibration. Similar laboratory techniques have examined rock specimens, including granite, by measuring the tones at which a prepared sample responds most strongly. The purpose is not to destroy the sample. It is to learn what the sample is like inside. You place your fingertips lightly against the limestone. Another tap arrives, and the vibration passes into your skin as a brief, delicate shiver. The block appears motionless, yet within it strain travels through countless mineral connections. Under ordinary conditions, the motion is tiny. The stone absorbs energy, releases energy, and remains entirely unimpressed by the drama people prefer to attach to it. Resonance begins with a simple idea. An object responds more strongly when repeated pushes arrive in a rhythm suited to its natural movement. A child on a swing rises higher when each push comes at the proper moment. Push at random. And little happens. Push with patient timing. And small efforts accumulate into larger movement. A stone is not a swing. Naturally. It does not sail cheerfully toward the clouds while somebody applauds from below. It is dense, irregular, damp in places, fractured in others, and often joined to surrounding material. Its energy escapes through supports, neighboring blocks, air, soil, and internal friction. To make it vibrate strongly enough to fail, one must deliver substantial power in a very particular way. The technician adjusts the equipment. A controlled signal enters the block through contact with a transducer. The stone gives a higher response, no longer a tap, but a thin, continuous trembling beyond musical beauty. A screen displays peaks, each showing a mode at which the sample answers more clearly. They resemble small mountains rising from an electronic plane. Nothing cracks. That absence is important. Finding a natural frequency does not mean the object instantly breaks. It means the object vibrates more efficiently at that condition. Fracture requires stress to exceed what the material can tolerate, often at a flaw already present inside it. A crack begins at weakness. Energy concentrates there. The opening may grow, slowly or suddenly. until the material separates. A perfect magical note is unnecessary. Enormous force is not. Modern industry does use high-frequency vibration to shape brittle materials. In ultrasonic machining, a tool vibrates rapidly while abrasive particles suspended in liquid wear away material between the tool and the workpiece. Scientific reviews describe the technique as useful for brittle substances, including ceramics and glass. It can create holes and precise shapes without heating the workpiece as some other methods might. But observe what the process requires: a powered machine, a shaped tool, close contact, abrasive slurry, careful control, time. The stone does not hear a floating tone and politely divide itself along a requested line. It is ground away by countless tiny impacts concentrated at the working surface. The vibration assists removal, but the abrasive particles perform the biting work. This is impressive technology, though it is far less convenient than a chant from 50 paces that turns masonry into dust. A laboratory assistant brings out a small slab, thin and polished. It contains a visible hairline fracture. When struck lightly, its tone sounds duller than a sound piece because damage changes how vibration travels. The brokenness has a voice of its own. Engineers can listen for such changes in buildings, machines, bridges, and manufactured materials. Sound may reveal weakness long before weakness becomes visible. There is something quietly unsettling in this. A wall may stand upright, clean and apparently dependable, while small failures hide inside it, altering its response to each vibration. A column may still hold weight while carrying the memory of strain. To listen carefully is not to command stone, but to discover that stone has never been as silent as it appears. In certain places, ordinary rocks can even produce clear ringing sounds when struck. These stones, sometimes called ringing rocks or lithophones when selected for music, have inspired curiosity in many cultures. People have arranged resonant stones into instruments, tapping them to produce tones surprisingly bright and bell-like. The effect is delightful, especially when a lump of rock produces a cleaner note than several determined humans attempting to sing together. Such stones have helped nourish the larger fantasy. If stone can ring, perhaps stone can be controlled by song. If a slab answers one tone, perhaps a stronger tone could split it. The first statement is true. The second is possible only under demanding conditions. The third, involving distant ancient workers effortlessly cutting enormous blocks with a secret frequency, has no confirmed evidence behind it. Your hand moves across the limestone surface. Fine dust gathers upon your fingertips. Close inspection reveals tiny shell fragments preserved in the stone, remains of vanished life pressed into a building material by time. It is not one uniform substance. It is a crowded history of minerals, pores, fossils, pressures, and weaknesses. Even blocks cut from the same quarry do not respond in precisely identical ways. This alone complicates the legend of a single shattering frequency. A tone suited to one shape may fail upon another. A block's dimensions alter its resonances. Moisture alters its behavior. Cracks, supports, contact points, and grain structure all matter. A giant masonry course joined within a wall differs profoundly from a prepared specimen resting freely in a laboratory. Materials scientists still investigate how vibration interacts with damaged rock, especially where cracks, fluids, pressure, and changing loads make behavior complex. Their questions concern mines, tunnels, earthquakes, construction safety, and the reliable testing of materials. There is genuine mystery within stone. It lies in difficult measurements and uncertain structures. not in an ancient number waiting to be spoken aloud. The technician increases the signal once more. The block hums faintly beneath contact, holding together beneath forces carefully monitored by instruments. It seems almost patient, as though enduring yet another human attempt to make it confess something extraordinary. At last, the power is lowered. The vibration disappears. The block remains upon the bench, marked only by dust, existing exactly as it did when the test began. You have heard the edge of the truth. Sound can probe stone. Vibration can assist cutting. Under sufficient stress, resonance can help fracture a vulnerable object. Yet stone does not surrender simply because a beautiful tone has found it. Its silence is not ignorance. It is strength, complexity, and resistance, waiting beneath the hand that wishes for an easier answer. At the edge of a river landing, a boat touches mud with a soft, sucking sound. Two men jump into ankle-deep water, steadying the vessel while others loosen thick ropes from wooden pegs. Its cargo is not grain, wool, or jars of oil. Wrapped in reed matting and packed against movement lie pieces of stone, dark, pale, veined, and heavy enough to make every unloading gesture cautious. The plane does not offer these materials generously. They have come by water and road from harder lands, carried through exchanges reaching beyond familiar fields. Each piece has cost effort before any craftsperson has placed a tool against it. Someone quarried it. Someone bargained for it. Someone watched it cross uncertain country. Someone cursed its weight while dragging it into a boat, probably with considerable sincerity. You stand beside the landing as a block is lifted onto a wooden sledge. The ropes tighten. Shoulders lean forward. A supervisor calls a steady rhythm, and the load begins moving across damp ground. It does not float obediently through the air. It scrapes, jolts, catches, and resumes its stubborn progress while men adjust their grips beneath the morning sun. This is stone entering a city. In storerooms and workshops, it becomes something more precise. A craftsperson does not confront a divine mountain. He confronts a piece of material that may split badly, conceal a flaw, blunt a tool, or demand more hours than the commissioner wishes to pay for. He studies the surface first. He tests an edge. He considers grain, hardness, shape, and intended purpose. Sacred beauty begins with practical judgment. Excavations at conducted by the Joint Penn Museum and British Museum expedition uncovered vessels, beads, seals, ornaments, and precious objects made from materials unavailable in southern Mesopotamia: lapis, carnelian, shell, metals, and stone arrived through wide networks of exchange. The evidence does not reveal an isolated city performing impossible feats. It reveals communities skilled at acquiring distant materials, organizing specialist labor, and turning imported hardness into objects of remarkable refinement. You enter a workshop sheltered behind a courtyard wall. The shade is welcome, though the air remains thick with dust. A craftsperson sits low upon a mat, steadying a small stone vessel between his knees. Beside him lie abrasive powder, a bow drill, slender tools, water, and unfinished pieces awaiting patient attention. His hands are strong, but the work depends less upon sudden force than repetition. He begins to drill. The bow moves back and forth in an even rhythm. A shaft turns within the stone opening, carrying abrasive grit where the surface must be worn away. Tiny particles gather in damp paste along the rim. The sound is dry, faint, persistent. It lacks the commanding roar that attracts legends. It is closer to the scratch of a stubborn insect trapped behind a wall. Repeated for hour upon hour until a hollow slowly appears where none existed. No single movement impresses you. Together, they create a vessel. Nearby, another worker polishes a bead until its surface catches light. He turns it carefully, examining the hole drilled through its center. A mistake near the final stage would transform valuable material into a rather expensive pebble, and his expression suggests he understands this possibility very well. Around him are pieces too small to inspire heroic poems, yet important enough to pass through households, temples, graves, and generations. A cylinder seal waits upon a cloth. It is little more than a small carved roller, but it carries an identity, an office, or a claim of ownership. When pressed and rolled over damp clay, its image repeats in an orderly band, worshippers approaching a deity, animals arranged in combat, a banquet scene, or a line of signs naming the owner. One small stone can guard a jar, seal a storeroom, authenticate a delivery, or announce a person's place in an organized world. There is mild mischief in the object. A seal cannot decide whether its owner is honest. It simply rolls out the proper image with complete loyalty, even when placed in the hand of someone whose accounting would cause several eyebrows to rise. Ancient administration, like modern administration, required trust supported by procedures and a reasonable amount of suspicion. In another corner, chips of stone lie beneath a work surface. These scraps matter. They are the quiet evidence of shaping, cutting, trimming, drilling, and failure. A finished vessel may inspire admiration, but discarded fragments reveal the workshop's habits. Archaeologists search for such debris because objects displayed within graves or temples show the result, while chips and unfinished pieces show the process. A worker pours water over a dusty surface and begins grinding with abrasive sand. Stone yields reluctantly, not through mystery, but because harder grains remove tiny amounts from the softer surface. The shape becomes smoother. Tool traces soften under polishing. A dull object slowly acquires the calm sheen desired for ritual or elite use. The process is slow enough to invite impatience. That impatience is one reason the lost frequency legend feels attractive. It removes calloused hands, damaged tools, strained backs, failed attempts, transport problems, and workshop dust. A tone rises, stone opens, and the labor disappears into elegance. Yet actual craft rarely offers such mercy. Beauty usually contains time, and time usually contains people sweating somewhere beyond the polished surface, near the temple foundations. Labor takes another form. Men carry baskets of clay. Brickmakers shape wet earth in wooden molds and leave rows drying beneath hard sunlight. Builders spread bitumen where water must be resisted. Reed bundles strengthen particular constructions. Wooden beams are dragged into position. Stone is precious enough to be reserved for selected objects. Fittings, thresholds, statues, vessels, beads, and foundation deposits, while brick forms the enormous body of the city. The contrast matters. A society possessing a secret instrument capable of effortlessly breaking or shaping stone would leave traces in its construction choices. Quarry remains, production debris, tools, or written administration. Instead, the archaeological record from Sumerian cities shows mud brick architecture supported by ordinary ingenuity and organized work. Stone arrives as valued material from outside the plain, worked carefully and used with intention. No confirmed sonic cutting device rests among the excavated tools. This statement does not diminish the craftspeople. It restores them. Their achievements appear more remarkable when you allow their real methods to remain visible. A stone cup becomes the result of trade routes, skilled hands, abrasive powders, drills, polishers, patrons, and institutions capable of supporting specialized production. A carved seal becomes the result of an eye trained to make tiny surfaces speak clearly when rolled across clay. A sacred object becomes the meeting place of material difficulty and human patience. Scholars continue discussing the organization of such craft production. Were certain specialists attached directly to temples or palaces? Receiving rations and materials through large institutions, did independent workshops also serve households and traders? How much control did rulers exercise over imported stone and precious goods? Workshops leave evidence, but the lives of individual makers remain harder to recover than the objects passing through their hands. The afternoon light shifts across the courtyard. A craftsperson lifts the finished vessel and wipes its polished surface with cloth. It is cool, heavy, and beautifully plain. Nothing about it announces the number of hours surrendered to its making. Nothing records the ache in shoulders, the wasted fragments, the abrasive dust beneath fingernails, or the slow anxiety of working imported material that cannot easily be replaced. A temple attendant receives it with both hands. Soon it will hold oil beneath lamp flame, standing in a sacred room where visitors may admire its permanence. They may imagine divine favor resting upon it. They may sense mystery in its smooth surface and distant origin. Yet its deepest secret is wonderfully human. Stone has not been conquered by a hidden voice. It has been persuaded through trade, pressure, grit, skill, and time. The city has drawn hardness from remote lands and placed it within its sacred heart. Not because the material surrendered easily, but because patient hands refused to stop shaping it. A tablet lies broken across a wooden table, its missing corner leaving several lines unfinished. The damage is ordinary. Clay falls, walls collapse, storerooms flood, and generations carry away fragments without knowing what they once contained. Yet the emptiness has a peculiar effect upon the mind. A complete text tells you what it says. A broken text also suggests what it might once have said. The missing signs seem almost luminous. You sit beside a scholar whose lamp casts a small yellow circle over the clay. He traces a copied line with one finger, pausing where the surface has crumbled away. Outside, rain touches the shutters lightly. Inside, the room holds the scent of old dust, wool cloth, and cooling tea. The scholar is not alarmed by the gap. Missing passages are part of his profession. He compares duplicates, studies patterns, and admits when a line cannot be restored securely. The imagination possesses less patience. Where a poem mentions thunder, it wishes to hear a machine. Where a mountain yields before divine force, it wishes to see a shattered cliff. Where a tablet breaks at the most interesting moment, it suspects the lost piece contained the answer. Absence acquires a voice, not because the evidence demands it, but because human beings dislike closed doors, especially those standing inside the past. In the old cities, knowledge was never preserved equally. Administrative tablets survived in immense numbers because institutions recorded deliveries, fields, workers, animals, silver, grain, and offerings. A jar of oil might receive more written attention than the private grief of the person carrying it. Sacred compositions survived when scribes copied them, taught them, stored them, and valued them enough for repeated use. Countless ordinary conversations vanished completely, along with melodies, gestures, accents, and explanations once considered obvious. That uneven survival creates a haunting illusion. The fragments you possess may seem like scattered parts of a much larger secret structure. Perhaps they are only scattered parts of ordinary life, rescued by accident from the enormous silence surrounding every ancient society. Yet when the surviving lines speak of gods, terrifying power, floods, weapons, and ruined lands, silence begins to feel suspiciously arranged. A scribe turns a tablet in his hands. On it appears a list of kings. The composition, now called the Sumerian king list, has been examined by specialists in Mesopotamian history, including scholars connected with the University of Chicago and other leading research centers. It presents kingship as descending from heaven, passing through successive cities, and surviving the immense disruption of a flood. Some earliest rulers receive reigns lasting tens of thousands of years, while later portions move closer to rulers and dynasties connected with historical evidence. This is a record, but not a simple chronicle. It offers a pattern of time in which order begins almost beyond memory, suffers catastrophe, then reappears in new cities under new rulers. Kingship does not belong permanently to one community. It moves. Cities rise beneath its protection, then lose it. Authority appears sacred, ancient, transferable, and dangerously temporary. A listener hearing such a sequence does not inhabit a straight path from primitive beginnings toward familiar history. He inhabits cycles of glory, collapse, and restoration. That pattern is fertile ground for hidden timelines. A modern reader encounters rulers lasting longer than civilizations, a flood dividing ages, and divine authority descending into human settlements. He may wonder whether the exaggerated reigns conceal forgotten epochs. He may imagine earlier peoples, earlier knowledge, earlier powers, swallowed by disaster and remembered only through ceremonial numbers. The leap is tempting because the text itself looks toward a time when the world behaved differently. There is a charming difficulty hidden inside the grand list. The reigns of some primeval kings are so magnificently long that an accountant attempting to verify their years might require several lifetimes and an unusually forgiving employer. Ancient scribes were perfectly capable of recording modest practical quantities. When they wrote reigns extending through vast spans, they were doing something more than checking a calendar. They were giving the earliest age a scale suitable for legend and sacred order. Still, the question remains open regarding exactly how the list functioned. Many historians understand it as a political and literary creation, arranging competing city traditions into a single vision of kingship. Others explore how flood memory, scribal schooling, local pride, and changing dynasties shaped its surviving versions. Its enormous early reigns are not treated as straightforward measured history, yet their meaning continues to invite discussion. The lamp flame wavers. For a moment, the tablet's incised wedges cast tiny shadows, each sign appearing deeper than it truly is. You begin to understand why the frequency legend refuses silence. It does not depend upon one line declaring that stone was split by sound. Such a line has not appeared. The legend survives because many ancient elements gather around the same emotional center. The gods speak with frightening force. Storms arrive as decisions. Weapons possess voices. Mountains become enemies. Stones receive judgment. Cities fall when sacred favor departs. Floods separate one condition of the world from another. Kings emerge from a time stretched far beyond ordinary human measure. Then the record breaks, leaving missing places where certainty cannot follow. Together, these images produce a feeling stronger than any one claim. They suggest that the familiar world rests upon buried layers, and that something powerful has been forgotten beneath them. The story does not need a diagram. It needs an atmosphere of interrupted inheritance, the sense that humanity arrived within an older structure whose original purpose is no longer understood. Outside the scholar's room, wind moves along the street. A gate latch trembles softly against wood. The sound is small, harmless, perfectly explainable. Yet in the stillness, it resembles an invitation to listen more closely. Perhaps this is how legends grow. Not through foolishness, and not always through deliberate invention, but through the human habit of leaning toward fragments and hearing them ask for completion. Modern life encourages the habit. You know that knowledge can disappear. Libraries burn. Languages vanish. Tools become obsolete. Systems once understood by thousands may become puzzles when their makers are gone. Entire technologies have been lost temporarily, then rediscovered through patient study. It is therefore not absurd to ask whether ancient people knew things no longer preserved. The danger arrives only when possibility becomes certainty. A forgotten technique may have existed without being a stone-shattering frequency. A ritual may have created overwhelming sound without concealing a weapon. A poem may preserve the memory of catastrophe without reporting advanced machinery. Missing knowledge is real in every ancient culture, yet gaps cannot be made to say exactly what longing places inside them. You walk in imagination through a city mound rising from the plain. Beneath your feet are collapsed houses, sealed rooms, discarded tablets, broken jars, lost courtyards, and the dust of innumerable evenings. Every buried layer once belonged to people who believed their present was complete. They had their explanations, their habits, their private jokes, their terrors, and their confident assumptions about what the gods intended. Most of it is gone. That loss is the true hidden timeline, quieter than the legend, and far more immense. It is not a secret civilization waiting to be uncovered by one dramatic tone. It is the vanished depth of ordinary and sacred experience, the countless meanings carried by songs whose melodies disappeared, ceremonies whose movements cannot be replayed, and words that reached the clay only in fragments. The broken tablet remains beneath the lamp. Its missing corner offers nothing you can honestly read. Yet the silence around it is powerful, because it belongs to a world that once sounded full and certain, then faded into earth. Somewhere within that silence, thunder still rolls over cities of brick. A god still raises a weapon. A mountain still listens. And the human mind, unwilling to leave the mystery untouched, still waits for one lost sound to explain everything. A clay fragment rests beneath a magnifying lens, its surface illuminated by a pale circle of light. Along one edge, the tablet has broken through several signs, leaving wedges sliced in half and meanings suspended. You sit close enough to see fingerprints left in the damp clay by someone whose name is gone. The marks are not dramatic. They are small accidents of touch, preserved because fire, burial, and chance treated them more gently than history treated their maker. The room around you is silent except for paper shifting softly beneath careful hands. Here, an ancient composition does not arrive as a complete voice speaking clearly from darkness. It arrives in pieces. One tablet carries several lines. Another preserves a damaged duplicate copied centuries later. A third contains a spelling that helps restore a missing word, or introduces another uncertainty entirely. The lost poem is assembled slowly, like moonlight gathered from separate pools of water. Oxford scholars working on the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature brought together hundreds of compositions from surviving tablet witnesses, making ancient hymns, myths, laments, and royal praises readable again. Their task was not to invent hidden meaning, but to compare fragments, identify repetitions, and state uncertainty wherever the clay would not yield certainty. This is how the old voices return, not as revelation, but through disciplined patience. You turn your attention to a single line describing force. A divine power may be said to roar. A hostile land may be said to tremble. A mountain may be lowered, subdued, or made to bow. The images are vivid, yet the distance between image and event remains difficult to cross. Was the phrase heard as literal devastation, ritual exaggeration, political praise, or some combination of all three? Did an audience imagine collapsing cliffs, defeated armies, terrified foreigners, or simply the majesty of divine command? Language carries more than one shadow. Sumerian itself deepens the uncertainty. It belongs to no known living family whose descendants might preserve familiar turns of phrase. Its signs can carry different readings, while poetic lines often depend upon associations understood by scribes trained within a world no longer available to you. A translator may know every visible sign and still pause before the atmosphere of a sentence. A word describing brilliance might suggest radiance, terror, or sacred splendor. A word associated with roaring may carry storm, battle, authority, or sound felt in the body. You hear none of the original voices. That absence is more important than it first appears. A sacred composition written upon clay is not identical to its performance. The tablet provides words, but it cannot give you the singer's breath, the pace of the recitation, the number of voices answering, the arrangement of listeners, or the moment when a phrase was allowed to fall into silence. It cannot tell you whether a particular name was spoken softly beside an offering, or raised above percussion before a gathered court. You walk through an imagined sanctuary reconstructed from foundations and broken walls. Its roofline is uncertain. Its hangings are gone. Wooden screens, mats, doors, and furnishings have dissolved into possibility. Even the surface of its walls may have changed how sound traveled through the room. A chant given beneath a low roof feels close and heavy. The same chant beneath an open sky thins into air. Without the vanished materials, the building's voice cannot be restored confidently. This creates an honest mystery. It is possible that worshippers experience their ceremonies with an intensity modern reading cannot fully recover. A repeated phrase, a deep instrument, flickering light, crowded bodies, incense, expectation, and the authority of a sacred setting may have joined into a sensation almost physical in its power. The experience might have felt as though a god had entered the enclosure, as though walls listened, as though the human body had briefly become part of a larger, trembling order. That possibility does not require shattered stone. Still, a peculiar modern rumor wanders through certain discussions of ancient places. Visitors sometimes claim that forgotten builders shaped sacred rooms to contain secret humming tones, perhaps allowing priests to stun worshippers or weaken masonry through resonance. A person standing inside a narrow chamber may clap, hear an unexpected echo, and feel the first delicious stirring of forbidden knowledge. The chamber almost seems to answer. Unfortunately, rooms have been embarrassing human certainty with strange echoes for a very long time. A resonant room may influence emotion. It does not become a weapon merely because it sounds impressive. The temptation persists because experience is harder to dismiss than a claim. When a low tone vibrates through your chest, you do not require a theory before feeling unsettled. When several voices merge beneath stone or brick surfaces, The boundary between sound and space seems to soften. When darkness prevents the eye from judging distances clearly, sound can make a room feel larger, smaller, closer, or suddenly occupied. Perhaps ancient religious specialists understood these effects through practice. Perhaps they knew where a singer should stand, when an instrument should sound, and how long silence should follow a terrible divine name. Such knowledge would be real, practical, and powerful. It might never have been written as a technical system because it belonged to trained bodies, repeated ceremonies, and inherited habit. There is no surviving tablet stating that a priest calculated architectural resonance for the purpose of breaking stone. Yet there may have been skilled knowledge of performance that disappeared without leaving a diagram. A song can vanish even when its words survive. A room can lose its sound when its roof falls. A gesture can die with the last person taught to perform it correctly. Researchers still consider how far Sumerian literary language reflects ceremonial practice rather than learned scribal art. Some compositions may have lived through public performance and sacred ritual. Others may have circulated mainly within schools, where future scribes copied ancient praise in disciplined rows. A line describing divine thunder could preserve remembered performance, elegant metaphor, inherited convention, or all of these woven together. The uncertainty is not failure. It is the shape of the surviving evidence. Near the lamp, a scholar places two fragments beside one another. Their broken edges do not physically join, yet their words complete part of the same passage. A missing action becomes readable. A divine title appears with greater confidence. The achievement is quiet, almost modest, but something absent has returned to human understanding. Not everything returns. No reconstruction can restore the exact moment when a listener in an ancient sanctuary first heard a roaring divine phrase and believed it. No translation can measure the fear passing through that listener's ribs. No modern instrument can prove how sacred sound altered the meaning of brick walls, lamplight, smoke, authority, and waiting. You place your hand near the tablet without touching it. The clay remains mute, holding both knowledge and loss within the same small surface. Scholarly caution asks you not to invent machinery where poetry stands. Imagination asks you not to flatten living terror into mere decoration. Between those requests, the ancient voice remains. It does not reveal a frequency. It does not surrender a hidden device. Yet it leaves open a quieter possibility that certain experiences of power, carried through sound and belief, were once understood with an immediacy the modern world can study, but never completely enter. A museum corridor has emptied for the evening, leaving only the muted breathing of controlled air. Behind locked doors, rows of cabinets wait beneath soft ceiling lights. Each drawer contains objects once handled beneath very different skies. Seal stones, fragments of vessels, foundation deposits, and tablets whose surfaces carry the pressure of reeds pushed into wet clay. You stand before one cabinet as a curator opens it carefully. Inside rests a tablet the color of dry riverbank earth. Its edges are uneven, its corners softened by burial and handling. A small label records its collection number, provenience, and publication history with the sober precision required by institutions responsible for fragile things. The label does not mention divine terror, trembling landscapes, or the fascination of people who believe one lost tone might force stone apart. The tablet needs no dramatic label. Its survival is already extraordinary. Clay writing endured because it could harden, sometimes deliberately within kilns, sometimes accidentally through fires that destroyed the rooms where tablets were stored. material meant for ordinary record-keeping became stubborn enough to cross thousands of years. Conservators at major collections, including the Penn Museum and Yale's Babylonian collection, preserve these objects as physical witnesses to Mesopotamian language, education, worship, commerce, and memory. A fire may erase a household and preserve its paperwork. There is a melancholy humor in that arrangement. Somewhere, a scribe may have worried about damp pests, careless apprentices, or an annoyed official. He probably did not imagine that the greatest danger to his building might help his tablet survive into a world of glass cases, cotton gloves, and visitors leaning forward with breath carefully held. The curator adjusts a support beneath the clay. From this angle, the wedges catch light differently. A row once appearing flat now reveals depth, each sign casting a slender shadow into its own incision. You become aware that writing is an act of force, though a very gentle one. The stylus enters yielding clay, leaves a shaped wound, and withdraws. Meaning remains inside the impression. No sound emerges. The object contains instructions for the mouth, not a trapped voice waiting to escape. Someone must recognize the signs, restore damaged phrases, decide among uncertain readings, and imagine the cadence with humility. The ancient speaker has vanished. The ancient listener has vanished. The tablet is what stands between them and you, patient and incomplete, asking to be read without being forced to confess more than it knows. Beyond the gallery windows, modern traffic passes along a wet street. Tires hiss across pavement. A bus sighs at the curb. A distant siren rises briefly, then disappears among buildings. Those sounds belong to systems you understand, or believe you understand. Engines, brakes, alarms, signals, electricity, schedules. Even when the city startles you, it rarely makes you suspect that invisible beings are rearranging destiny above the rooftops. Yet the tablet comes from another habit of listening. Its makers lived in places where a voice could determine obligation, honor, punishment, belonging, and protection. Their sacred poetry enlarged that familiar force until a divine utterance could govern the horizon. They did not need numbers written beside a musical scale to know that sound changed human beings. They had heard grief expressed in measured lament. They had heard authority announced in courts and gates. They had heard storms flatten grain, drums gather attention, and chants steady frightened hearts. The claim that a precise ancient tone shattered stone offers a neater marvel. It places power inside a secret mechanism, a lost note, a missing instrument, a forgotten craft locked somewhere beyond ordinary explanation. It turns the listener into a seeker standing near an answer. Perhaps that is why the idea continues moving so easily from one imagination into another. The surviving clay remains more restrained. No known Sumerian tablet names a stone-breaking frequency. No excavated device has been securely identified as a sound weapon used against rock. No workshop record describes blocks separated by controlled tones. What the record preserves is richer in feeling and poorer in machinery voices compared with storms. Sacred commands imagined as irresistible. Ritual speech used against danger, and divine force pictured through a world that listens and responds. You watch the curator close the drawer halfway, then pause. On one side of the tablet, a few signs are clearer than the others. Perhaps they belong to praise, perhaps to a name, perhaps to a line whose fuller meaning survives only because another copy was found elsewhere. The smallest wedge may settle a translation that once remained uncertain for decades. A quiet mark in clay can restore a lost word. while leaving the larger silence around it untouched. Researchers still weigh the distance between sacred language and lived experience. Some emphasize poetic convention, showing how storm imagery, royal ideology, and ritual vocabulary gave divine figures their terrifying scale. Others ask how ceremony, acoustics, emotion, and collective expectation allowed such language to feel almost bodily true. Between these positions lies a narrow and honest ground. The texts may not document an acoustic machine, yet neither do they describe an empty world of harmless metaphor. People believed through their senses. A chant heard beneath a temple roof was not merely a sentence read in translation. A command spoken beside offerings was not merely an interesting phrase preserved for later study. A roar associated with a god could gather memory, dread, loyalty, and hope into one audible shape. To stand within that experience would be to understand something the tablet cannot completely deliver, because clay records words more faithfully than it records the trembling of a human chest. The curator withdraws her hand. For a moment, the open drawer resembles a small, dark chamber, with the tablet lying inside like an object placed carefully for burial. It is tempting to imagine it guarding an unfinished secret. It is more truthful to see it guarding an unfinished encounter. You're meeting people who left only selected traces. A scribe presses a stylus down and lifts it again. A singer receives a line and gives it breath. A worshipper stands within lamplight and hears power in the air. A scholar turns fragments beneath modern light, refusing easy conclusions while continuing to ask difficult questions. There is dignity in that refusal. The tablet does not become less haunting because it offers no hidden frequency. Its silence becomes deeper. It preserves a culture in which sound could announce judgment, shelter the vulnerable, fill sacred rooms, and make the hardest things in the world seem responsive to a greater order. That understanding is not an engineering secret, but it is not a small discovery either. The drawer slides gently closed. The click is scarcely audible, yet the museum quiet seems to gather around it. On the other side of wood and glass, the ancient clay remains in darkness, carrying marks shaped by someone who could never have known your face, your language, or the hour in which you listen. No stone breaks. No final answer rises from the dust. Only an old idea remains awake inside the silence that's somewhere between the human voice and the listening world. Power once seemed to move in ways no surviving tablet can fully explain. Now the corridor grows dimmer, and the final light withdraws from the glass. You no longer need to examine the clay closely. You no longer need to search each broken edge for a sign that settles the mystery. The tablet may rest now, quietly held within its drawer, beneath the careful shelter of the modern world. Your breathing becomes slower, far away. The river plain cools beneath a field of stars. Mud brick walls soften into shadow. Reeds stir beside black water, bending gently whenever the night breeze crosses them. A lamp burns low within a house whose name is gone. Somewhere, hands finish their work and settle upon woven mats. Somewhere, a final song diminishes until even memory can scarcely follow it. The stone does not need to speak. The clay does not need to reveal everything. Perhaps power was once heard in thunder, in ceremony, in a parent's whispered plea, or in the solemn voice of a singer beneath sacred walls. Perhaps later ages gathered those sounds into stories of instruments and hidden knowledge, because silence is sometimes harder to accept than wonder. And perhaps silence deserves kindness. You can let the unanswered question remain beside the old tablet, neither rejected with coldness nor embraced beyond evidence. You can leave it where night leaves so many human mysteries, softly outlined, faintly luminous, and peaceful in its incompleteness. The ancient city fades from view, its streets empty, its waters settle, its last imagined echo passes gently into earth. Nothing follows you into sleep except the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, steady and safe beneath the darkness. And perhaps the story is not yet complete.